Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. My name is Kharisma Faiz Azhari. I am student from Faculty of Teacher and Education, University Muhammadiyah of Surakarta. On this occasion, I will present the result of my research entitled KABI podcast on Spotify as an alternative search for learning listening skill for elementary school students. Next, introduction. In the digital era, technological learning media are increasingly developing and being used in the world of education, including listening skill. One of these learning media is KABI Podcast on Spotify as an alternative search for learning listening skill. However, in the implementation of Indonesian language learning, especially listening skill, students often feel bored and lost intuition, especially when the teacher delivers reading that are too long. Augustine 2020. Apart from that, this condition is exacerbated by conventional learning methods so that students become less active in the learning process. Many previous studies still focus on podcast media in general without highlighting certain types of content that can increase learning effectiveness, and apart from that, most of the previous research focused more on the use on interactive visual or digital media, while there was still limited of podcast in learning. No studies have been conducted regarding the proper exemplary stories KABI podcast on Spotify at the same time. Thus, this research aims to fill gaps in the literature and explore how KABI podcast can be an innovative solution in improving listening skill for elementary school students. The main aim of this research is to explore the use of the KABI podcast on Spotify as an alternative source of learning listening skill for elementary school, especially in class 4, Sidoarjo Elementary School 3. This research focuses how audio media can improve student focus, understanding, and listening skill in learning Indonesian, which has not previously been researched. Next, research method. This research qualitative method with a case study approach. The research has carried out at Sidoarjo Elementary School 3 with its location at Sukoharjo Regency with research subject, namely teacher and class for students. Data collection technique used in this research use observation, interviews, and documentation. The validity of the data is strengthened through triangulation of such and technique use. The data analysis, the technique use triangulation, Shinaga 2023. The Mills-Berman method, data reduction, data presentation, drawing conclusion. Next, result and discussion. The results of the research show that the use of the KABI podcast as a medium for a learning listening skill in class 4 of Sidoarjo Elementary School 3 has a positive impact on student understanding in listening to narrative text. Students show increased focus, concentration, and engagement in learning after using podcast is as a learning medium. Apart from that, it is easier for students to understand the content of the story being told because the narrative in the podcast use simple and interesting language and contains a strong moral message, even though obstacles are found, such as limited direct interaction between teacher and student. This can be overcome by adding supporting material such as quizzes and summaries to increase learning activity, learning effectiveness. Thus, the KB podcast can be a narrative alternative in listening learning that is more flexible, interesting, and relevant to technological development in the digital era. Next, result and discussion implementation of the use of the KABI podcast learning step. Number one, pre-listening. The teacher provides an introduction and learning objectives. Number two, listen. Students listen to the KABI podcast through the speakers in class. Number three, pause listening. Students retell the content of the story, answer question and discuss the moral message. Next, interview result student opinion. Number one, student feel happy and concentrate more. Student feel happy because their way of learning is different from usual, which is more flexible. Students that they preferred studying with podcasts because they were interesting. There was music in the podcast. Number three, the KABI podcast is interesting because it has a clear storyline and voice that is pleasant to listen to. Next, teacher opinion. Number one, KABI podcast is effective in improving student listening skill. Number two, makes learning more interesting than conventional methods. Number three, the teacher suggested that the KB podcast be equipped with supporting materials such as a quiz or summary at the end of the story so that it can help evaluate student understanding. Next, research documentation. Figure 1, photo of study listening to a podcast in class. Figure 2, photo of student retelling the content of the podcast. Number 3, copy view on Spotify. Figure 4, documentation of the result of interviews with teacher and student. Next, obstacle and solution. Obstacle. One of the main obstacles in using KABI podcast as a learning medium is the limited direct interaction between teacher and student. Because podcasts are a one-way medium, student can only listen to the material without the opportunity to discuss or ask question directly if they have difficulty understanding the content of the story. This can be a challenge for students who are used to interaction-based learning, where they may ask the teacher for further explanation when they encounter difficulties. Solution: the overcome these obstacles. Several solutions can be implemented. One solution is to provide supporting materials such as quizzes or summaries after the podcast listening session. This can help students remember important points from the story and ensure they truly understand the content of the material. Next, last conclusion overall, this research showed that the KABI podcast can proven effective in improving the listening skill of fourth grade students at Sidoarjo Elementary School 3. The use of podcast makes learning more interesting, flexible, and helps students focus more on understanding narrative text. The activity of retelling podcast content also strengthens student listening and communication skills. Even though there are obstacles such as limited direct interaction between teacher and student, solutions such as adding supporting material and summaries can increase learning effectiveness. Therefore, KABI podcast can be an innovative alternative in listening learning and have the potential to develop other language skills with interactive features such as quizzes and discussion. That's all the presentation of the research result. I upload this if there are any wrong words. See you next time. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.